Okay, hello everyone. Today I kind of wanted to talk about some intermediate tips about the game. I've noticed that a lot of new players are getting into the game, and while the game is fairly easy to understand the basics and core concepts of it, it starts to get really difficult once you start to understand the more complex features, quote unquote, of this game. A lot of it isn't very healthy for the game, I don't think, but I'm glad everyone seems to be having a good time. So let's get straight into it. The first thing I want to be talking about is swing manipulation. It is a vital part of the game and is going to be your main source of actually dealing hits in. If you're a beginner, a newbie player, you'll probably be wondering why you aren't landing any hits. It's more than likely going to be your swing manipulation that needs work. There's two types of swing manipulation mainly in this game, which is going to be accels and drags. Now, again, this is going to be a intermediate, not beginner-friendly video. So if you don't know what an accel and drag is, I'd suggest go watching a tutorial video of that. But accels and drags are more than just looking your camera in a certain direction. Accels are going to be looking in the same direction that you're swinging. Drags are going to be looking away from the direction that you're swinging. However, you can manipulate both by doing other things. For example, if I want my accel to be way quicker, look quicker than it actually is, I could use footwork to dash to the side that I'm going to be excelling in order to make my character model look like the accel comes out way faster. Or if I inversely am going for a drag, it can be a little bit difficult, but what I like to do is I like to walk in the direction opposite from where I'm dragging. So if I'm dragging on this direction, I'm going to be walking in this direction, right? So I like to do that sort of thing. It helps with my drags. If your opponent is just backing up, all you have to do is hold a forward key with that, and you'll soon find that you'll be able to hit it. Now, another great thing that I wanted to be talking about is animations. There's two types of riposte animations in this game. There's going to be JPEG animations, and then there's going to be a different type of animation, which I actually don't remember what it's called, but I'm going to be calling them twirlies. So this is going to be a twirly, and you'll notice on the riposte that my character like twirls the weapon around before attacking. Right, it kind of goes like in a weird circle and then it goes across. That's going to be your twirly, and JPEG animations are going to look a little something like this, where your character, that wasn't a JPEG, but where your character's arms are kind of just straight. Your weapon doesn't really make any twirly animation; it just goes straight across. And those two animations can serve different purposes for either an accel or a drag to make it look more menacing than it actually is. For example, I like to use JPEG animations with a drag, or with an accel, I'm sorry, because they just look really scuffed, right? Your opponent can't really see what's going to be happening. They can't really tell whether or not I'm going for a drag or an accel, because it just looks really funny. The only way they can tell is from my body movement, and that can be minimized by keeping your cursor on target in wind-up phase before your release phase. So you keep your cursor on target in wind-up, and then in release, flick to the side whether or not you want to do a drag. It will just depend. So keep your cursor on target and then flick to the side. This will help minimize your character's animation with looking in that direction, making yourself more predictable. As for twirlies, you can make the twirly animation look really, really scuffed by slow riposting. And I don't really see this talked about enough, but slow ripostes make this game actual hell for people trying to learn timing. The way you slow ripostes is by, once you parry, don't go immediately into an attack, which looks like that, right? It's not immediately straight into an attack. You're going to parry, then wait just a millisecond or two, then attack. and that's going to make the riposte come out way sooner or way later, and this is very effective with drags. Obviously sometimes it's hard to do. I miss it a lot, but if you're able to get it down consistently, it will look a lot cleaner, or well, a lot more scuffed, honestly, not cleaner, than your normal riposte animation. And of course the timing for your drags is going to be way more later with slow ripostes. Now, there's a lot of ways to abuse animations and like a lot of crazy drags, but honestly, I find that just playing consistently, having unpredictable drags and unpredictable accels are going to get you pretty far in this game. Obviously, there's going to be like cucumber drags and all this other Wessex shit, but don't worry about that. Just worry about getting drags and accels down and being able to do them in fast-paced environments, and you'll be good. Next point I wanted to cover was going to be defense. Defense is more than just your parry. It's also going to be footwork, and there's another of other different things, but chambering is also a good defensive tactic that I don't see a lot of people talking about as a defensive move. If you find that your opponent is feinting a lot, a chamber could really throw them in for some real damage, because I mean feinting costs a lot of stamina, and case in point. But if you chamber against somebody who feints a lot, you will usually find that you're able to land a lot of attacks if you just counter feint. So if you're up against somebody who's spamming this sort of stuff, let me remove the bot. But if you're up against a person who's like spamming a lot of weird feints like this, you could just counter chamber or counter feint them, and it will force them to either make a decision to feint again, waste more stamina, or they will panic parry. And a lot of times I feel like I get people to panic parry, mostly because my feints are pretty strong, but that'll be a different topic covered in just a little bit. But I find that if somebody's doing a lot of feints to you, just feint right back in their face, they'll usually parry. Now, the more consistent way to play is going to just be, if you see a feint coming, just go for a chamber and attack right away. It will waste a lot of their stamina, with them having to feint and block. And stamina and HP are hand in hand, very, very, very important. Your HP bar is obviously going to be whether or not you're alive or not, but your stamina bar also dictates if you can parry, and if you can't parry, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. Sure, you can footwork your way out of things, or matrix, but a lot of times your parry is going to be your number one source of defense. Footwork is also going to be a huge point that I want to talk about. If I'm in range with my attack, normally my opponent is also in range with their attack, right? Now, obviously, it depends on what type of weapon you're using, how long it is and whatnot. But if I'm in attacking range, usually my opponent is. So the name of the game is going to be hit and don't get hit, right? If it's my turn to attack, let's say I block a riposte, now it's my turn to be on the offense. I want to try to get pretty close to my opponent to get in striking range. Whereas if it's their turn to attack and my turn to block, I want to get away from my opponent. This serves a couple of purposes. One, it makes your opponents easier to read if you're a ways away from them, right? A feint up close in the face like this is way harder to read than a feint over here, right? It's way easier to read it over here. Same goes with drags or accels. A drag from this position could be really hard to read, so can an accel, but a drag from over here is a little bit easier to read, and so is an accel. So you can use those tips, vice versa, whether or not you're in attacking phase or defending phase. And so it can be a lot of things. Footwork can do a lot of things. Mainly just layering your defense with it and layering your offense. And the way you layer your offense is just going to be like making yourself unpredictable, giving yourself more leeway with footwork, and just doing things like that make you unpredictable. Now, feinting is going to be my next topic, which is what makes a good feint. A lot of new players, they will do something like this, thinking that it will get them hits, but I mean, it does sometimes. Even I get caught with it sometimes, but this isn't a good feint as opposed to something like this, right? If I'm running in looking like I'm really going to attack somebody, that sells the feint a lot more than just... And another key point is don't feint a drag, right? Drags are good because they're unpredictable mid-fight, right? Keeping my cursor on the target, then dragging mid-riposte makes it unpredictable. That's what the power of the drag is. If I'm feinting a drag, that doesn't look as menacing as my weapon right up in your face, right? It just doesn't look anywhere near as menacing. So don't feint drags. Mainly you want to be feinting excels right up in your opponent's face, but out of their kicking range. I see a lot of players tend to go like this. They feel like getting real up and close personal and feinting a lot is going to score them hits, but they forget that a lot of players will just kick them away. So you do want to be staying away from kicking range, but also making yourself a little bit more menacing. Now, to my point that I mentioned about chambering, if you are going for a feint, just be careful for your opponent's counter feints. If they do counter feint, you can always feint again, but I wouldn't recommend feinting more than 2 or 3 times if your opponent counter feints, because quite frankly, you're just wasting a ton of stamina. And if they decide to attack, you're just going to be down quite a bit of stamina. So the good feints that I feel like are the best are going to be the ones mid-fight, mid-duel, right? So let me just spawn a bot here. They're going to be the ones mid-duel, because the flow of combat usually goes something like attack, they riposte, they attack, you riposte, you attack, they riposte, you attack, right? So if you break that sort of flow of just doing this shit, right, and go like that, right, I broke the flow, and although that was a bit of an easy feint to read, you can also make them a lot harder to read. The way I usually like to do that is combining my feints with a look away and then straight into an overhead. It makes your feints look a lot more menacing. They can't really see what you're planning, and although sometimes I'm not the best at it, but that sort of feinting style of just being unpredictable, breaking the flow of combat, if this bot would riposte. Okay, well, breaking the flow of combat is what I'm aiming for here. And that's what feints are really good at. The other good thing that feints are fairly decent at achieving is a little bit of distance. Now, if that doesn't make sense, I want you to picture this. Sometimes winning a duel doesn't just mean attacking until your opponent's HP pool is down. It also means maintaining a higher amount of stamina than your opponent and outstamming them. So if I can do a feint and they back off, I'll just keep backing off until they decide, oh shoot, he's trying to regain stamina or something. They start running forwards, and then, you know, the duel continues. But in that time that they spent running forwards, it cancels their stamina timer. And while that time you're walking backwards, you're regaining stamina, right? So sometimes the long game is what makes dueling in this game. Is what will win you a duel in this game. As for reading feints, that's a bit of a kind of honestly skill issue, but also time investment, but also proper spacing, mainly. Reading feints is very difficult. I'm not going to lie. It's going to be a very, very challenging thing, especially for beginners, because feints are so hard to read in this game. It's very difficult to read this, you know, last second feint from, oh, I got insta-excelled in my head, right? It's hard to read that. The best you can do is just give yourself some space, and if you find that your opponent is feinting a lot, you could counter feint and just, or you could just chamber, and they'll be down stamina. I am really bad at reading feints, but honestly, all of this is so toxic for new beginners because they don't know what's going on. And even players like me who have a couple hundred thousand hours in the game will still fall for something like this because it just looks scuffed, right? Because I then have to read a stab, a slash feint into, you know, a morph or whatever this is. It technically is a morph feint, I think, but it's just so cancer to read. So normally when I find people who do this a lot and it's like in my face, I'll just kick them away. But if they do keep doing this sort of morph feinting, I'll usually wait for them to morph, and then I'll counter their second attack with a chamber of mine, so that they waste a ton of stamina and I just get to chamber for free. A lot of the game just comes down to experience. There's no real way of getting good at this game. It takes a lot of time. And if I'm being completely honest, the time investment isn't worth it, because the more time you spend in this game, the more you realize how scuffed the combat system really is. And although it can be fun at first, learning it, I'll spare you guys a couple hundred hours and tell you it's fun up to a point. I enjoy it because I'm a sadist, right? But a lot of other people will not enjoy this game, but I don't blame you. So, yeah. I hope you guys enjoy this game and this little guide. I will make more in the future. I'm a bit tired right now, but if I missed anything, let me know. I'm sure I missed a ton of stuff, but I just wanted to make a little something for intermediate players who are trying to get better at the game. Okay, bye-bye.